"I don't celebrate Christmas," he said, until an Apache woman showed him what sacred means. The desert town was small and quiet, especially during winter. Most people thought deserts never felt cold, but the evenings told a different story. The wind moved through the empty streets like a slow whisper, carrying dust and silence with it. Wooden buildings stood close together, some old and worn but still full of life. Shop windows displayed lights and decorations as Christmas approached. Children ran across the sidewalks wearing colorful scarves, laughing loudly, their voices echoing between buildings. Everyone seemed to be preparing for something joyful. Everyone except Daniel. Daniel owned a small repair shop near the edge of town. The sign above the door was faded from years of sun, but the tools inside were always clean and organized. He opened early every morning and closed late every evening. People trusted his work. He spoke politely, fixed problems quickly, and never charged more than necessary. But he kept his distance. When customers wished him Merry Christmas, he gave a small nod and returned to his work. "I don't celebrate Christmas," he would say simply. Some people tried to ask why when he first moved to town years ago, but eventually they stopped. Daniel's voice carried a final tone that made questions feel unwelcome. It was not anger. It was something quieter, something heavy. Inside the shop there were no decorations, no lights, no music, only the sound of metal tools and engines. The town had grown used to him that way. Every December followed the same pattern. Daniel worked longer hours than usual. He accepted every job, even small repairs others might refuse. He avoided social gatherings. He skipped town events. When night came, he drove home through streets glowing with lights but never slowed down to look. His house stood alone outside town, surrounded by dry land and distant hills. Inside, everything was simple. Clean walls, basic furniture, nothing unnecessary. One evening, as winter grew colder, a customer named Mrs. Carter entered the shop carrying a plate of homemade cookies wrapped in paper. "For you," she said with a warm smile. "Everyone deserves something sweet during the holidays." Daniel hesitated. He wanted to refuse, but her kindness felt genuine. "Thank you," he said quietly, placing the plate on the workbench. She looked around the shop and noticed the absence of decorations again. "You never put up lights," she said gently. Daniel paused, tightening a bolt on an engine. "No," he replied. She nodded slowly, understanding more than she said aloud. "Well," she added, "if you ever change your mind, the town gathering is next week." Daniel gave a polite nod but said nothing else. After she left, he stared at the cookies for a long time before finally taking one. The taste reminded him of something distant, a memory he quickly pushed away. He finished work late that evening and locked the shop. The sky was already dark. Stars shone clearly above the desert, brighter than anywhere else. He drove toward home, but halfway there, he remembered he needed supplies from a nearby town. Without thinking too much, he turned the truck around and headed down the highway that ran along the edge of an Apache reservation. The road was quiet, no streetlights, only the headlights cutting through darkness. As he drove, memories tried to rise again, soft voices, laughter, the sound of bells from another time. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and focused on the road instead. The engine suddenly made a strange sound. Daniel frowned. A moment later, the truck shook slightly, then slowed. He pulled to the side of the road, stepping out into cold air. The desert night felt sharper than usual, wind brushing against his face. He opened the hood and checked the engine. Something had failed unexpectedly. He tried calling for help, but there was no signal. Daniel leaned against the truck, breathing slowly. He had fixed thousands of engines, yet this problem would take time and tools he did not have with him. Minutes passed. Then he noticed movement in the distance. A figure approached slowly from the direction of a nearby cluster of buildings. As the person came closer, he saw it was a woman wrapped in a thick shawl. Her steps were steady and calm. She stopped a few feet away. "Truck trouble?" she asked softly. Her voice carried warmth without pressure. Daniel nodded. "Looks like it." "I'm Ayana," she said. "My family runs a small repair place nearby. We can help." Daniel hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. There was no other choice anyway. She walked beside him toward the small building he had barely noticed before. Light came from inside, glowing softly against the darkness. As they entered, he felt unexpected warmth, not just from the fire burning in the corner, but from the feeling of the place itself. Simple decorations hung along the walls, not Christmas decorations, but handmade items shaped from natural materials. A young boy greeted them with a smile. An older man nodded respectfully. They began working on the truck immediately. While waiting, Daniel sat near the fire. The sound of quiet laughter filled the room. Someone prepared food nearby, the smell gentle and comforting. It felt different from the busy holiday noise in town. It felt calm. The boy offered him tea. Daniel accepted, holding the warm cup between his hands. After some time, Yana sat across from him. "You're from town," she said. "Yes. Everyone there is getting ready for Christmas." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I don't celebrate Christmas," he said automatically. Yana studied him for a moment, not with judgment, only curiosity. "Not everything sacred needs lights," she said quietly. Her words surprised him. He looked at the fire, watching flames move slowly. Something about the moment felt unfamiliar. Not painful, but strange, like standing at the edge of a memory he had avoided for too long. Outside, the desert wind continued to blow. Inside, warmth slowly began to reach places he thought had closed forever. Daniel did not expect to return. After his truck was repaired that first night, he drove home slowly, the desert road quiet under the moonlight. The warmth of the small repair shed stayed with him longer than he liked to admit. He told himself it was only gratitude. They had helped him. That was all. But the next morning, when he woke up, something felt different. For the first time in many winters, he did not wake up with that heavy weight pressing on his chest. The silence in his house still existed, but it did not feel as sharp. He went to work as usual. Customers came and left. Holiday music played faintly from the grocery store across the street. A group of children walked past wearing red scarves, laughing loudly. Daniel tried to focus on his work, yet his mind returned to the firelight from the night before. To the way Ayana had said, "Not everything sacred needs lights." Sacred, he had not thought about that word in years. To him, sacred once meant Christmas morning. It meant small hands opening gifts. It meant his wife laughing while pretending to be surprised by something she had already guessed. It meant warmth in a small living room filled with simple decorations. After he lost them, sacred became something he avoided. It felt like a door that, once opened, would only bring pain. By afternoon, Daniel made a quiet decision. He closed the shop an hour earlier than usual, something he almost never did during December. He told himself he only wanted to thank them properly. The road toward the reservation looked different during daylight. The desert stretched wide and open, soft hills rising in the distance. The air felt cold but clean. When he arrived at the small repair shed, he saw Yana outside, hanging dried herbs near the doorway. She looked up as he stepped out of his truck. "You came back," she said calmly. "Yes," he replied. "I wanted to say thank you." She nodded as if she had expected him. Inside, her family welcomed him without surprise. The older man he had seen before introduced himself as Thomas, Ayana's father. The young boy was her brother, Mateo. They were working on another vehicle, but they made space for Daniel near the fire again. He noticed more details this time. The walls were decorated with woven patterns. Small handmade objects rested on shelves. Everything had meaning, even if he did not understand it yet. Yana handed him a cup of warm tea again. "You are early to leave work during this season," she observed gently. Daniel gave a small smile. "Yes, I usually stay busy." "Busy can hide things," she said. He did not answer. After some time, he finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "Last night you said not everything sacred needs lights. What did you mean?" Yana sat across from him, folding her hands. "In our family," she began, "winter is a time of remembering. We do not focus on gifts or big decorations. We focus on stories, on gratitude, on honoring those who walked before us." Daniel listened carefully. "For us," she continued, "sacred means connection to land, to family, to memory, even to pain." The word pain made him shift slightly. "Pain can be sacred?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she answered, "because it shows that something mattered." Daniel stared into the fire. Flames moved slowly, rising and falling. He had spent years believing that avoiding Christmas protected him. He thought if he ignored it, he could protect himself from remembering too deeply. But here, in this simple place, pain was not hidden. It was acknowledged. Thomas joined the conversation. "When my grandfather passed away," he said calmly, "we did not stop gathering during winter. We gathered more. We told stories about him. We cooked his favorite food. We remembered his voice." Daniel felt something tighten in his throat. "I couldn't do that," he admitted softly. "I packed everything away." Yana's eyes were kind, not judgmental. Sometimes we pack things away because we think it will make us strong, she said. But strength can also mean holding memory gently. Outside, wind brushed against the building. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Later that afternoon, Ayana showed Daniel something she was working on, a woven blanket stretched across a wooden frame. The threads were deep blue and warm brown, crossing in careful patterns. "It's beautiful," Daniel said honestly. "It takes time," she replied. "Each thread matters." "What is it for?" She smiled slightly. "For someone who needs warmth." He did not ask more, but something about her words lingered. As evening approached, the family prepared a simple meal. They invited him to stay again. This time he did not hesitate as long. He sat at the table with them. There were no loud songs, no flashing lights, only conversation and shared food. Mateo asked Daniel about fixing engines. Thomas shared stories about growing up in the desert. Yana listened quietly, occasionally adding small details. Daniel found himself speaking more than he expected. He told them about his repair shop, about moving to town years ago. He stopped short of speaking about his wife and daughter. Not yet. But for the first time, he did not feel the need to leave quickly. When he finally drove home, the town lights did not feel as harsh. They still reminded him of loss, but now there was another image in his mind, a small fire in a quiet room, where sacred meant something deeper than celebration. The next day at the shop, a young boy came in with his mother to pick up their repaired car. The boy held a small handmade ornament shaped like a star. "Look what I made for Christmas," the boy said proudly. Daniel froze for just a moment. Instead of turning away, he knelt slightly to look closer. "It's well made," he said sincerely. As they left, Daniel stood alone in the shop, thinking. That evening, he returned to the reservation again. This time, Ayana was weaving the blanket near the doorway, sunlight touching the threads. He sat nearby quietly, watching her work. "Why winter?" he asked after a while. "Why not another season?" "Because winter reminds us that light still exists even when days are short," she replied. "It teaches patience." Daniel nodded slowly. He realized something important then. He had not been patient with his grief. He had tried to silence it instead of understanding it. Iana looked at him gently. "You don't have to celebrate Christmas," she said, "but maybe you can decide what sacred means for you now." Her words stayed with him long after he left. That night when Daniel entered his house, he walked past the closet he had avoided for years. Inside were boxes filled with decorations he had not touched since the accident. He did not open them, not yet, but he stood there for a long moment. And instead of walking away immediately, he whispered softly, "Maybe sacred doesn't have to hurt." Outside, winter wind moved across the desert. Inside, something small, almost invisible, began to shift in his heart. And though he still said, "I don't celebrate Christmas," for the first time in many years, he was no longer certain that he meant it the same way. Daniel began visiting the reservation more often, though he never announced it to anyone in town. He would close his shop at the usual time, lock the door, and drive toward the quiet stretch of desert road that now felt less empty than before. At first, he told himself he was only returning to learn more about their way of living. But deep inside, he knew something else was happening. The small fire in that shed, the calm voices, the slow rhythm of their evenings, all of it felt like a kind of healing he did not fully understand. One afternoon when he arrived, he saw Yana sitting outside with the weaving frame again. The winter sun was soft, painting the desert in light gold. The blanket she was working on had grown larger. The deep blue threads now formed patterns that looked like mountains and flowing water. He stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "You've added more," he said. Ayana looked up and smiled gently. "Yes, it is almost halfway finished." Daniel stepped closer. He studied the pattern carefully. "It must take a long time." "It does," she replied. "Each thread must be placed with care. If one is rushed, the pattern becomes uneven." Daniel thought about his own life. After the accident years ago, everything had felt uneven. He had rushed into silence, rushed into distance, rushed into shutting down parts of himself. He watched her hands move slowly, pulling thread through thread. "Who is it for?" he asked again. Ayana paused before answering. "It will be given during a winter gathering." "Someone who needs warmth." Daniel did not press further, but he felt something stir inside him. Later, they sat by the fire inside the shed. Thomas was telling Mateo an old family story about the desert during a difficult winter many years ago. The story was simple but powerful, about a family who survived because they stayed together and shared what little they had. Daniel listened carefully. The way Thomas spoke was steady and calm, like someone who understood that stories were more than entertainment. They were bridges between generations. After the story ended, Daniel surprised himself by speaking. "My daughter used to love winter stories," he said softly. The room grew quiet, not in discomfort, but in attention. He had never spoken about his daughter to them before. "She would sit on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders," he continued. "She would ask me to read the same story again and again." Ayana's expression did not change, but her eyes grew softer. "What was her favorite part?" she asked gently. Daniel swallowed before answering. "The part where the family stays strong together." The words hung in the air. For years, he had avoided speaking about his daughter during winter. The memories felt too sharp. But here in this room, surrounded by quiet respect, the memory felt different, still painful but also warm. Thomas nodded slowly. "Stories keep people close," he said, "even when they are no longer sitting beside us." Daniel looked at the fire. The flames moved slowly, steady and patient. That evening, Yana asked him to help carry wood inside. As they walked outside together, the sky was turning orange and pink. "You are carrying your memories differently now," she said calmly. Daniel looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Before, when you spoke about your family, your voice was tight," she explained. "Today, it was softer." He thought about that. "I still feel the loss," he admitted. "You always will," she said gently, "but loss and love are connected. One does not exist without the other." He had never thought of it that way. A few days later, Daniel stayed longer than usual. Yana invited him to sit beside her while she worked on the blanket. "Would you like to try?" she asked. He hesitated. "I don't know how." "I will show you." She placed the weaving tool in his hands and guided him carefully. His movements were clumsy at first. The thread slipped once, then again. "Slowly," she said. "There is no rush." He adjusted his hands and tried again. This time, the thread crossed correctly. They worked in silence for a while. The rhythm of weaving felt calming. The pattern slowly expanded under their hands. "This is how we honor difficult times," Yana said quietly. "We create something steady." Daniel nodded. He began to understand something important. Sacred was not about perfect moments. It was about choosing to stay present even when memories hurt. That night when he returned home, he walked to the closet again. The box inside still waited. This time he opened it. Inside were small ornaments wrapped in tissue paper. A tiny wooden angel his daughter had painted unevenly. A simple string of lights his wife had loved. His hands trembled slightly, but he did not close the box. Instead, he sat on the floor and held the wooden angel carefully. He ran his thumb across the uneven paint. For a moment, tears filled his eyes, not loud, not overwhelming, just quiet. He whispered her name softly. Then he placed the angel on a small table near the window, not as decoration, not as celebration, as remembrance. The next evening he returned to the reservation and told Ayana what he had done. She listened carefully. "That is courage," she said. "It didn't feel like courage," he replied. "Sometimes courage is very quiet," she answered. As winter moved forward, the town grew brighter with lights. But Daniel no longer avoided looking at them completely. He still did not decorate his shop. He still did not attend holiday parties, but something inside him had shifted. One afternoon, Mateo asked him, "Why don't you celebrate Christmas?" Daniel thought for a long moment before answering. "I thought I stopped because it hurt," he said honestly. "But maybe I stopped because I was afraid to feel anything at all." Mateo nodded in a simple way only a child could. "My sister says feeling things makes us strong," the boy said proudly. Daniel smiled slightly. A few days before the winter gathering, Ayana finished the blanket. The patterns were complete now, mountains, rivers, and small shapes that looked like stars woven into the corners. "It is ready," she said quietly. Daniel looked at it with respect. "It's beautiful," he said again. She folded it carefully. "You helped with it," she reminded him. He blinked in surprise. "Only a little." "Every thread matters," she replied. As he drove home that night, Daniel realized something important. He had spent years saying, "I don't celebrate Christmas," as if it were a shield. But now, the words felt less like protection and more like a question. Maybe sacred was not about celebrating the same way others did. Maybe it was about learning how to carry love and memory without running from them. And for the first time since that painful winter years ago, Daniel no longer felt completely separated from the season. He still carried grief, but now he also carried something else. Connection. Winter deepened across the desert, and the air grew colder each morning. Frost touched the ground before sunrise, turning the dry earth silver for a short time before the sun warmed it again. The town became brighter as more lights appeared on houses and shops. Music drifted through open doors, and people moved quickly, carrying gifts and packages. Daniel watched it all from a distance, but something inside him had changed. The decorations no longer felt like sharp reminders. They felt softer now, like echoes of memories instead of wounds. At his repair shop, customers noticed a small difference in him. He still worked quietly, but he listened more when people spoke. Sometimes he even smiled faintly when children came in with their parents. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter returned to pick up her car after a routine check. "You look lighter," she said kindly while signing the receipt. Daniel paused, unsure how to respond. "Maybe," he said simply. "Well," she continued with a warm laugh, "whatever you're doing, keep doing it." After she left, Daniel stood outside the shop for a moment, watching snow clouds forming far away over the hills. He thought about the upcoming winter gathering Ayanna had mentioned. He felt nervous about going, yet also curious. That evening, he drove toward the reservation earlier than usual. As he arrived, he noticed more activity around the buildings. People moved back and forth, carrying baskets and blankets. Small fires burned outside, sending thin lines of smoke into the sky. Ayanna greeted him near the entrance. "You came," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I wanted to help if I can." She nodded with approval and handed him a stack of folded chairs. "Then you can start here." Daniel worked quietly beside others. Some people introduced themselves briefly, welcoming him without asking too many questions. Their acceptance felt natural, not forced. As he helped prepare the space, he noticed there were no bright decorations like in town. Instead, handmade items filled the area: woven cloth, carved wooden pieces, small bundles of herbs tied with care. Everything felt meaningful. "What happens during the gathering?" he asked Ayanna while placing chairs in a circle. "We share stories," she explained. "We remember the year, we honor both joy and struggle." Daniel nodded slowly. That night he stayed longer to help arrange food tables. Laughter filled the air as people worked together. Children ran between adults carrying small lanterns. Mateo ran up to him holding a carved stick. "Look what I made," the boy said proudly. Daniel examined it closely. The carving was simple but strong. "It's good work," he said sincerely. Mateo grinned widely and ran off again. Daniel watched him go, feeling a quiet warmth he had not allowed himself to feel for years. Later, he noticed Ayanna placing the woven blanket carefully near the center of the gathering area. "It's finished," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, "it's beautiful." She smiled slightly but said nothing more. As the night of the gathering arrived, Daniel felt unsure again. He stood outside his house for a long moment before leaving, staring at the small wooden angel he had placed on the table near the window. The candle beside it burned softly. He took a deep breath and drove toward the reservation. When he arrived, people were already gathered around a large fire. The flames moved slowly, casting warm light across faces. The sky above was clear, filled with bright stars. He stood near the edge at first, unsure where to go. Ayanna noticed him and waved him closer. The gathering began quietly. An elder spoke first, thanking the land and the people present. Others followed, sharing moments from their year, challenges they faced, lessons they learned, gratitude for those who helped them. Daniel listened carefully. He noticed something important. No one tried to hide hardship. One woman spoke about losing her job but finding support from her community. Another man talked about illness and recovery. Each story carried honesty and strength. When silence fell again, Ayanna stood up holding the woven blanket. "This blanket represents warmth shared," she said calmly. "It carries many hands and many stories." Daniel felt something shift inside him as she spoke. "We give it to someone who needs to remember that they are not alone." She walked slowly around the circle, then stopped in front of Daniel. He froze. The firelight reflected in her eyes as she held the blanket toward him. "You helped weave this," she said softly. "You shared your story. You came back even when it was difficult. Tonight we honor that." Daniel felt overwhelmed, not with fear, but with emotion he could not easily describe. "I don't know what to say," he admitted quietly. "You don't need to say anything," she replied. She placed the blanket gently around his shoulders. The warmth surprised him. not just from the fabric, but from the feeling of being seen and accepted. For years, he had believed he needed to carry his grief alone. Standing there, surrounded by people who respected silence as much as words, he realized he did not have to hide anymore. Later, during the open sharing part of the gathering, Daniel felt a strong urge to speak. His heart beat faster as he stood slowly. All eyes turned toward him, but there was no pressure in their expressions. "I always said I don't celebrate Christmas," he began. His voice sounded steady but quiet. "I thought it was because I stopped believing in it. But maybe I stopped because I didn't know how to carry my memories." The fire crackled softly. "My wife and daughter loved this season," he continued. "After I lost them, everything felt empty, so I closed that part of my life." He paused, breathing slowly. "But coming here, listening to your stories, learning about what sacred means, I think I understand something new." He looked down at the blanket around his shoulders. "Sacred doesn't mean perfect or happy all the time. It means remembering. It means connection. It means allowing both love and loss to exist together." Silence followed, but it felt full, not empty. Some people nodded gently, others simply watched with calm understanding. Daniel sat back down, feeling lighter than he had in years. After the gathering ended, people stayed near the fire talking quietly. Yana sat beside him. "You spoke from the heart," she said. "I didn't plan to," he admitted. "The best words rarely are planned," she replied. He laughed softly, surprised at himself. As he prepared to leave, he realized something important. For the first time since his loss, winter did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something to walk through, slowly with meaning. Driving home under the stars, the blanket resting across the passenger seat, Daniel understood that healing was not sudden. It came in small moments, shared meals, quiet stories, simple acts of kindness. And tonight had been one of those moments. When he reached his house, he placed the blanket gently on the back of a chair near the window. The candle beside the wooden angel still burned. He stood there for a long time, watching the flame move softly. And for the first time, he whispered without fear. Maybe sacred was never gone. Outside, winter continued. Inside, Daniel finally felt warmth that did not fade with memory. Winter mornings arrived slowly, bringing quiet light across the desert hills. The air felt cold but calm, and the town seemed softer than before. Snow never stayed long in this place, but frost covered rooftops early each day, turning everything silver for a short while. Daniel woke earlier than usual. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the small candle near the window burn steadily beside the wooden angel. The woven blanket rested across the back of a chair, its deep colors catching the morning light. He had not planned to change anything about his life, yet everything felt different. He still did not decorate his house like others in town. He still did not play holiday music or hang lights. But the silence in his home no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful, like a quiet space filled with memory rather than emptiness. He finished his coffee and prepared for work. Before leaving, he paused near the wooden angel and touched it gently. "I remember," he whispered softly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. At the repair shop, the day began normally. Engines needed fixing. Customers arrived with small problems and left satisfied. But Daniel noticed he felt more present. He listened fully when people spoke. He laughed once or twice at simple jokes, surprising himself. Around midday, a young girl entered the shop with her father. She wore a bright red scarf and carried a small box. "My dad said you fixed our truck last week," she said shyly. Daniel nodded. She handed him the box. Inside were homemade cookies shaped like stars. "We made extra," she said. Daniel felt a warm feeling rise in his chest. He accepted the gift with a small smile. "Thank you," he said sincerely. After they left, he placed one cookie beside his tools. The shape reminded him of something familiar, small hands decorating cookies long ago, laughter filling a warm kitchen. Instead of pushing the memory away, he allowed it to stay. Later that afternoon, he closed the shop early again. This time he drove not out of curiosity, but out of intention. The road toward the reservation felt familiar now, like a path he had walked many times. When he arrived, Yana was standing near the entrance, watching the sky. "You look thoughtful," she said as he approached. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he replied. "And what did you decide?" He paused before answering. "I still don't celebrate Christmas the way others do," he said honestly, "but I don't want to avoid it anymore either." Yana nodded gently. "You are creating your own meaning," she said. They walked together toward the fire where Thomas and Mateo were preparing tea. The atmosphere felt calm, like always, but Daniel noticed small changes, more people visiting, more laughter, more shared moments. He realized that sacred was not a single event. It was something built through many small actions. That evening, Daniel helped repair a broken fence near the community area. As they worked, Mateo asked him questions about tools and engines. Daniel explained patiently, showing him how to hold each tool correctly. "You're a good teacher," Iana said quietly when Mateo ran off. Daniel shook his head slightly. "I never thought of myself that way. People change when they allow themselves to open," she replied. Her words stayed with him. A few days later, Christmas morning arrived. The town woke early. Church bells rang softly in the distance. Children ran outside to see what gifts waited for them. Smoke rose from chimneys as families gathered inside warm homes. Daniel woke before sunrise. He sat quietly in his living room, looking at the wooden angel and the woven blanket. He felt a mixture of emotions: sadness, gratitude, calmness. Instead of avoiding the day, he decided to move through it gently. He prepared a small wooden box he had been working on during evenings after closing the shop. Inside were small carved stars made from leftover wood pieces. Each one was simple but carefully shaped. He drove to the reservation carrying the box. When he arrived, he found Ayana and her family preparing breakfast near the fire. They welcomed him warmly. "I brought something," he said, placing the box down. Inside, the carved stars reflected the morning light. "They are not Christmas decorations," he explained quietly. "They are just reminders of light." Thomas picked one up, examining it closely. "Made with care," he said approvingly. Mateo smiled widely, choosing one and holding it proudly. Iana looked at Daniel with understanding. "You found your own way," she said softly. They shared a simple meal together, talking and laughing. No one spoke about holidays directly. There was no pressure to follow traditions or expectations. And yet Daniel felt something he had not felt in many years: peace. Later, he walked alone for a while along the edge of the desert. The sky stretched wide above him, clear and endless. He thought about his wife and daughter. He imagined their laughter, their warmth, their love. For years, he believed that remembering them during winter would break him. But now he understood that remembering could also strengthen him. He whispered their names into the quiet air. "I carry you with me," he said. When he returned to his house that evening, he lit the candle beside the wooden angel again. He placed one carved star beside it, creating a small space of remembrance. Not celebration, not denial, just connection. As night fell, lights from town shimmered faintly in the distance. Daniel watched them from his window, no longer turning away. He still did not celebrate Christmas in the traditional way, but he no longer rejected the season either. He understood now that sacred was not about following a specific tradition. It was about honoring what mattered: love, memory, community, and healing. The desert wind moved softly outside, carrying quiet sounds through the night. Inside, Daniel sat wrapped in the woven blanket, feeling warmth that reached deeper than any fire. He realized something simple and true. Sacred is not something others give us. It is something we learn to see again. And sometimes it takes meeting someone who understands silence, someone like Iana, to remind us that even after loss, meaning can grow again. The candle flame moved gently, steady and calm.